not be just in time. And so that is a inventory control system that I would be concerned with in Scrum. Anyway, yeah, that's I just an aside here, you know, when I was getting my business degree and my MBA years ago, you know, that model, just in time and dimming, et cetera, was really the focal point, right, of everything associated with inventory, right? And I think, you know, personally, and I don't know how you all feel about it, because I'm not an expert in this. I look at it and go, I feel like the pandemic really showed us the ultimate, you know, what happened when, you know, we've got everything just in time and then there's a disruption. And so now we're seeing that where we're looking back on, well, we may need to, we're now addressing, well, we do have to recognize we have to have some inventory or at least access to inventory. So I just think that's kind of interesting, you know, in my time in the pseudo business world called government acquisition, right? Okay, so I'm just going to start out here with Dr. McKown's bio. It's impressive stuff, but I won't read it all per his request. Dr. Lyndon McKown, a member of the Department of Defense Senior Executive Service, is the deputy director of logistics, civil engineering, force protection, and nuclear integration, headquarters, Air Force Materiel Command, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio. Dr. McKown develops and directs policy for depot overhaul, emissions, supply, logistics plans, transportation and packaging methods, logistics data systems, as well as repair and modification of Air Force weapon systems. Dr. McKown plans and coordinates product support and acquisition logistics for all fielded and emerging Air Force weapon systems, as well as establishes guidance for Air Force retail and wholesale supply chain management of spare parts valued at more than $5.8 billion. That's super impressive. And when I look at this, I'm a huge fan of what the Air Force, because I know the Air Force, but I'd say DoD in general, has accomplished in logistics. You know, when I say, you know, we've been flying the B-52 for 50 years, and when our flight 51, well, that's our logistics system and depots out there that are able to do that. It blows me away personally. So anyway, with that, I will turn it over to Dr. McKown. Thank you, sir.
Well, greetings, everyone. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules to show up and to join us today. And a special thanks to you, Jeff. You know, we've been teaming with the small business team here for several years to try to get the word out as far as supply chain risk management. And it's been a win-win situation. So for those of you that have attended some of our previous Collider sessions, I want to continue the dialogue that we started then. And for those of you that are new, I want to start a conversation and hopefully develop a mutually beneficial relationship with you in regards to SCRM. But before I get started, I want to do a level set for everyone on the environmental context that really brought SCRM into public mainstream spotlight. And Jeff talked to that a little bit, but you know, COVID and the associated shortages of toilet paper kind of brought the fragility of our supply chain into the public view. You know, who would have thought? You know, it made the public aware of the fact that we didn't have resiliency in our supply chains. And I believe that there are at least three reasons for this. And the first one, you know, Jeff also kind of alluded to that, is the lean initiatives that those of us in business have been working for years. You know, the fact that inventory is bad, the just in time, you know, that what we need to do is focus on our main product line and not worry about vertical integration as far as, you know, contract out to subs, you know, resources and raw materials and that type of thing. And to me, we're dealing with that in the Department of Defense too. It is overly, it's an over focus on efficiency versus effectiveness. And so what we need to do is kind of develop a balance between efficiency and effectiveness. You know, we need some inventory for just in case. We need to probably have multiple sources of supply on that. The second thing I think is brought SCRM into the spotlight is, you know, it seems like we're having more adverse weather, you know, tornadoes, hurricanes, and those type of things. So we see that, and we need to have situational awareness of where our supply chain is at, and how those type of things affect the supply chain. But finally, to me, the main thing that I'm focusing on is asymmetrical warfare and this great power competition. You know, back in the day, warfare was pretty much army on army, and you know, it was direct. And over time, we've kind of evolved into you know, indirect type of warfare, where we would attack you know, the enemy's supply lines. Reminds me of World War II, when we looked at, you know, the air campaign on Germany's ball bearing factories, where we would attack the factories, affect their supply chain, and ultimately the thought was that by destroying their supply chain, it would stop their war machine, would allow us to have victory. But that has even evolved over you know, time, in that, you know, our adversaries and our competitors no longer have to attack the supply chain. They can just buy the supply chain, or they can corner the market on, you know, basically rare earth materials, those types of things. So it's a lot more nuanced, and I think that that's something that we're dealing with, and I'm sure you're dealing with that too. And then great power competition. You know, back when we were doing this efficiency type of thing, we took a lot of risk in our supply chain, and that might have been the right thing to do, because the environment that the Department of Defense was operating on, you know, the Cold War was finished. We took the peace dividend. We were really fighting the global war on terrorism, kind of a low to mid-intensity conflict for many, many years. So I think our leaders thought we can take risk in the supply chain because it's an acceptable risk in a global war on terrorism environment. But that's all changed. You know, when you're talking about great power competition, when you think about you know, World War I or World War II, where you've got peer competitors, bottom line is logistics basically is the deciding factor in those type of conflicts. And so we focused on that, and our enemies focused on that too. And so we've got things that we're looking at under the basically the banner of contested logistics. We're no longer going to have opportunity to basically do like we did in Desert Storm, where we can build up our forces, you know, get ready for a conflict unabated, and then at the time of our choosing attack, you know, we're going to have to fight our way in, and not only is our deployed forward forces going to be, you know, vulnerable, the homeland is going to be vulnerable here too. You know, with this nuanced asymmetrical warfare, You know, they could do cyber attacks or those type of things. And no, this is really serious business. And what I wanted to do was read you a quote from the DLA director that I got in my email this very morning. And what DLA, the Defense Logistics Agency, which takes care of all of you know the services supply categories, they're putting together a working group, and they basically emailed me and Air Force Materiel Command to participate in this. And this is what their director, this is part of the email. He says, we realize our adversaries are contesting our efforts in all domains and at all levels of war, overseas and in the homeland. We are in a decisive decade requiring transformational solutions to achieve the readiness, responsiveness, and resilience of warfighters need. To support this transformation, DLA must think, act, and operate differently. And I submit that in today's environment, we all must act, think, and operate differently. And so the topic of today's presentation is to accelerate our SCRM awareness and activities. And Mike Hoover is going to do the main presentation. I'm kind of like the opening band, and Mike's the main attraction. So my part in today's presentation is introduce you to who we are, tell you what we're seeking from you all, and to let you know how you can help us. So if you go to my first slide. So in Air Force Materiel Command, and you'll notice that it's with an E, not an A. It's in our command, it's the cardinal sin to send a staff package or anything. You put the A instead of the E, you're banished from the island. So and it's important because you know the E means it's really supports the warfighter. And Air Force Materiel Command, we've got many facets. You know, we've got the life cycle management center that does the acquisition of the materials. And then kind of A410's role is not the acquisition chain, it's the organized training and equipment. And you might ask, you know, what that means. And the organized training and equip, to me, it basically rolls down to we're responsible for the policies and the processes. And you know, the supply chain risk management is one of those processes, and that's why we're here today. But we also are responsible for equipping, you know, the tools and the things that can facilitate those processes. And so it's Jeff was saying, you know, we basically in A410, we do the logistics, the civil engineering, the force protection, and the nuclear integration. And you know that you've got your job scope is pretty broad when you have to pay for that second line on your business cards. That's where I figured out I was in trouble. But one of the things that processes we're charged with is supply chain risk management. And it's very important. However, we have a small but mighty team that's working it. We made a lot of inroads, but we've not been able to scale it as much as possible because we just haven't been able to. And you know, you talk about the planning, programming, budgeting process. We haven't been able to get our POM input to get additional resources to scale the program. So we're working it. I think we made a lot of inroads in our small and mighty team, i.e. Mike Hoover. We leverage every opportunity we get to partner with folks. And that's kind of what we're asking of you all today is to partner with you. And so maybe Maybe you're in the same situation that we are, is that you don't have a lot of dedicated resources for supply chain risk management, or as many as you'd like, and so, what we want to do is partner. And we've got basically, I think we've got the guidance, we've got some subject matter expertise. We're starting to get the policy in the DAFI 63101 and the 2101. And the manual of responsibility has been pinned on 8410 or AFMC, and so we're working it. But what do we seek from you all? So next slide. So the Life Cycle Management Center, all the program offices are buying all this material and have programs. And one of the things that they have in the contract is requirements for data. And so for any particular problem, program, you've got procedurals, which are nothing more than kind of a statement of work or a statement of requirement specifically. For data coming in, it could be contracting data, it could be program management data, it could be engineering, it could be logistics data. You know, for logistics, I know when I was in the program office, provisioning data was one of the big things. We had reliability and maintainability data. And so we have got a huge amount of data coming into the program offices, but it may not be in a format that we can readily leverage to do our SCRM analysis. Because we ask for, and the procedurals or the DIDs are very specific, and we're not very smart about asking for something that we can use for multiple purposes. It's usually something that's very specific, and the contractor, they give you exactly what's in the data. A lot of times, you know, we'll get something and go, we don't like this, and the contractor will come back to us and say, it's exactly what you asked for. So we're not, what we don't want to do is, we don't want to go out and ask for additional data from the contractors, because that'll cost a lot of extra money. What we want to try to do is brainstorm with you all on how we can take this existing data sets that we got, potentially use tools to craft it into a format that we can use in our SCRM operations. Start. So how can you help? We know that some of you are already working with program officers on the type of deliverables that I mentioned here. And Mike is going to be sharing a few examples. So if you're not actually tracking what we're asking for, I think the examples will help. And, you know, this knowledge coupled with the ability to transform these data sources into a SCRM usable format is what we're after. And so we're looking for your knowledge, processes, and maybe even tools to help us. And if you believe that you might be able to help, please listen to the details that Mike's going to get into and get with us on, because we love to partner. As I mentioned, we think SCRM is very important. It's vital. It's relevant in the time that we're living in now. And unfortunately, we're resource constrained and can't scale it to the level that we would like. And so you may be in the same situation. And so what we want to do is team with you, get your ideas, and see if we can make some inroads into this stuff. This is a little bit different than than some of our previous SCRM colliders in that this is really more focused, and it's really more asking what you can help us with instead of kind of going over what SCRM is in general, or how we can help you as far as with your SCRM program. So, Mike, did I miss anything?
I think you got it all, sir.
Any questions for me? I'm giving you some time back, so more time at the bar. So, just in conclusion, thank you once again for coming out. This is a worthy topic. Thanks again, Jeff, for inviting us. It's always a pleasure to work with the small business, and I do think that you are the backbone of our country. So we want to make sure that you're healthy and aware of the threats, because I think we've got some worthy adversaries out there that are trying to get into that are in our supply chain. They're trying to undermine, our ability to provide material with an E to our war fighters, and so we want to try to come up with mitigation strategies to good things. Thank you once again. Appreciate it.
Hi, I'm Mike Hoover. I've been in the seat as the focal point for Air Force SCRM out of AFMC for almost 4 years now. Jim has told me I need to stand at this podium so y'all can hear me. I think you can hear me. So, although I'll try, I will not succeed standing still. Send that. What is this podium? Because I'm standing on it. Otherwise, it's a left turn. But you have to be a nerd to know that. Yeah. Next page. By the way, if you're driving by building 262 at right path, like you're rolling by on 444, and you see a guy standing outside staring at the building, help them out, say it's spelled with an E. That's where we send them when they screw it up a few times, stare at the side of the building and figure it out. So this is what we're gonna go over, pretty generic. We're gonna get into the stuff here. Next. So I said, let's start at the top and work our way down. So we have policy that comes out, OSD has multiple policies, and I'll say the same thing I've said in the last couple of years. We have a lot of policies on supply chain risk management, but we have no dedicated supply chain risk management policy. So there is no DMDI, Department of Defense instruction that says supply chain risk management, but it is included in several other ones. For example, you'll see that there's a reference right here for DMDI 5000.83, which is also DAFI 63113. So Department of Defense instruction, right? When you hear somebody say that's against the regs, we don't use regs anymore, we use instructions, but it's the same intent. DAFI's Department of the Air Force instruction. Anybody know why it's DAFI instead of AFI? Because there's a Space Force now, and it applies to both, so it's DAFI, DAFI done, right? 63113, which is an amplification of that policy, that is program protection planning. That is an engineering function done by system engineers to determine what parts of a weapon system are going to carry either critical program information, or it's going to consist of critical components. They are required to put out a plan for countermeasures for those items. One of the things that they have to look at is supply chain risk management. We said, Mike, you just stood here and got introduced by your SES to A4, which is logistics. What do you have to do with program protection planning? I don't, but I do have a lot to do with SCRM, so we work with systems engineers. We also have policy inside of cyber and cybersecurity. You might say, what? You just told me you're in A4 logistics. What do you have to do with cyber? Not a lot, really, but I do have the people that can do it, and we do put the functions and the tenets of SCRM into it so that we can make sure that as we're going out and procuring software or having it developed for us, that we understand where those different pieces and parts of the code come from in order to keep us on the straight and narrow. So you're going to hear a lot as I go down through what the requirements are for us to do, and what the requirements are for program managers to do. So this is a program office responsibility. Everything in this starts with the PM will. Okay, now, there's a lot of stuff in this particular 63101 because it's life cycle management. It starts with the PM will. It's a royal title, right? If you go into a program office, for those of you that haven't been in one, there's not one PM. You can't throw a stick without hitting the PM in a program office, right? So in particular, if you're dealing with logistics, you're going to be down in the product support area. So there's going to be a material leader who's a PM and a product support manager who's generally a logistician, and they're going to set up product support together. And inside of each functional area, there'll be a PM coupled with a logistician to get it done. So in provisioning, there's a PM that is worried about cost, schedule, and performance. There's a logistician worried that we're getting the right information in the right format to load our logistics system so that we can accurately and appropriately do integrated material management, right? So it's two in a box on almost everything. So when you hear the PM will, sometimes we're talking about a PPO, sometimes we're talking about the senior material leader, sometimes we're talking about the material leader, sometimes we're talking about the program manager that's down here feeding up into all of that, okay? So we start with including threat assessments on critical components per the program protection plan. That says that if you have an item that is identified as CPI or CC and you need something that is going to require a SCRM countermeasure, that you go and you request it from what used to be DIA SCRM Tech. That's the Threat Assessment Center. That's the tech part. DIA is the Defense Intelligence Agency. Now that analysis is done by OSI, so the Office of Special Investigations, that's an Air Force office that's augmenting them to get those reports through faster. So that's something that they are required to do. And you're going to see on the next slide, we help with those kinds of things, right? Next, when we go down, assessments will evaluate the following risk lists. You can see there's a whole bunch of them that are on there. We maintain that list that actually got signed out by the Honorable Lohman, coming out from acquisition and sustainment. He is the S and AMS. Signed out and said these are the ones that we're going to look at and maintain. So we maintain that list as well as all the subgroups that come underneath them. So those are the big words, right? So we might have something that says financial, but inside of financial, there's a shred that goes down to a whole bunch of other individual portions of what we would consider financial. It might be, think of your financial 10K, 10Q reports. We might be talking about, do you have the liquidity, right, to withstand a problem that's coming up? Do you have the financial wherewithal to be able to expand and scale if you were to get a large government contract? It's those kinds of things that would be nested underneath that. The next, do monitoring for identified supply chain vulnerabilities. So once you find a risk and you understand what it is, your job is to build some sort of risk handling solution for it, right? There's 4 things you can do with the risk, right? Does anybody know what those are? So no, all right. So you can accept it, which means, yeah, it's there, but I can't do anything about it, right? You can avoid it. That's what everybody wants, right? It's not even going to have to deal with it. You can mitigate it, which means I can lower the likelihood or the impact that it's going to have on me. Or my favorite is you can transfer it. You can make it somebody else's problem, right? You don't often get to do number 4, but when you do, you feel like you got away with something. Finally, go down, document your SCRM risk and mitigations and the ACT strategy and the program protection plan, right? Plan, this one sets the date and then the acquisition strategy. For those of you that don't know what an acquisition strategy is, the document that's filled out by a program manager and uses it for what we plan to do to acquire a capability. It is usually not available to vendors. It's usually a program office function, and it is shared within the PEO and then up to service acquisition executive. Includes stream requirements and market research, RFPs, contract language, and source selection evaluation criteria, which means that when you are choosing your vendors, you should consider how secure their supply chain is on those items that are up here. And then finally, contact the command SCRM focal point for assistance, and more importantly, support the command SCRM focal point for enterprise risks that impact the program. So the enterprise risks are usually not a program issue. Usually it is multiple programs. And so what we're saying in that particular line is, if it's going to affect multiple program offices, we don't want 7 different solutions or 20 different solutions, or sometimes hundreds of different solutions. You need to coordinate and work with us so that we can come up with an Air Force solution that works for everyone. Okay, next chart.
Hey, Mike, can I just add something real quick here?
Sure.
I just, because it just comes to my mind that, when we have these class, when we mention these DAFIs and DODIs, those are all Googleable and publicly out there. So,
Yeah,
you know,
EPUBs.
yeah.
All EPUBs.
it's on- and that's publicly out there. So please, you know, just search those and print a copy or pull it down and give it a read.
I even made it easy for you. It's
Yeah.
in 4.26.2, like you go right to the paragraph, right? Okay, next chart. So now, as the focal point, what am I responsible for providing? You're gonna say, might be sound an awful lot like facing responsibility to the entire chart that you just wrote, and they are, right? So we're gonna say, we're gonna serve as the clearinghouse for SCRM data and collaborate with the industrial base PM. What does that mean? When somebody goes to get a SCRM tech, we have an office that helps them to go and get it. They also help them to look at their program protection plan to identify where issues might be. And they also help when that report comes back to help interpret it if it's got some specific language that's not easily interpretable on how it's going to affect the program. Assist PMs as requested to establish and make available SCRM analytics capabilities. So you remember in the last one of the previous chart, it said you're supposed to call me if you need help. This one says, when they call, I'm supposed to help them, right? The actual wording sounds like Mike is not a jackbooty thug that can kick in the door and tell you what to do. But if you want his help, you can go and ask him and he needs help, right? So that's, the wording's a little more clear than the actual instruction. Provide PMs with SCRM language for, and those are the exact same things we read on about the 4th or the 5th bullet, right? We have those. Those are out there. They all sit, when we saw Dr. McGowan's chart that says Mount Siebel, right? We have Mount Siebel. We have some contributions to that in particular too. One is to put the requirement for a SCRM plan onto an integrator so that we know that they understand what their requirement is and how they're going to accomplish it. The second one is to say, when you find risks, you gotta tell us what they are, because risk management is an inherently governmental function, right? So if you find those risks, let us know so we can make decisions about it. Those are also out in the public domain, not the actual plans that they send us, but the requirement for those plans and the requirement for the reporting. You can go to a website called Assist. Just type in supply chain risk management or SCRM, it'll pop up. Actually, more than just R2 will pop up, a whole bunch of pop. All right. Maintain standard risk lenses and definitions for supply chain risk assessment. So when somebody comes to me and says, Mike, I'm ready to start my journey into SCRM, we go through and talk to them about what those major lenses are and what all the subcategories are underneath them. And why do we do that? Well, you've got to be concerned with all of them, but some of them are more important to you than others. The F-16 has particular considerations, right, with manufacturing, with quality, with where the materials come from strategically, like things like titanium or other specialty metals. If I belong in the Space Force and I have a surfer with an antenna pointed at the sky, my considerations are a little different. Maybe not so much titanium, right? But maybe gold is for all the connections inside of that high-speed server. Maybe I'm more concerned with the software stack that I have as opposed to the F-16 worrying about its platform IT, right? Specific IT versus more general IT. So we want to make sure when they go through, they understand what we need, where we want to look, what is going to come up. And then we manage a facing library of potential mitigations that they can choose from. So I have a garage. Inside of my garage, I have a giant toolbox. And inside of that toolbox, each drawer has a certain kind of tool in it. The top drawer, anybody know what's in the top drawer? We always put the top drawer. Screwdrivers, right? Screwdrivers.
Okay, screwdrivers.
So why do you put screwdrivers? It's the most used thing that you have in there. How many different screwdrivers do I have in there? I don't know, probably 20, 25 different ones. They go from a triple hot Phillips point, which is a little tiny jeweler's one, up to a giant P4, which you can, break almost lug nuts off with. But each of those screwdrivers, they don't work for a different application. There's not one screwdriver in there that does everything. So when somebody says, Mike, I got a problem and I need a screwdriver to fix it, I don't say, well, here's the one screwdriver I have. I have a whole drawer full of screwdrivers. And I say, I think one of these three will work for you. And then they can take that recommendation and implement it, or they can go get their own screwdriver, Jim. Doesn't matter to me. I just want them to handle that risk. So when we go, we manage those standard risk ranges and definitions. We also use that on the phasing side. So as we organize their thoughts into what they're going to look for, they come back and say, I found this problem in this area under that subgroup, and then I know which drawer on the toolbox to pull out and go, here are the tools that are available for you. All right. We coordinate risks that are enterprise and the mitigation efforts across our Air Force program offices. So that's not just the LCMC, that also includes the Equipment Center. And does that happen yet? Yeah, it happens. We have things that pop up that affect all of us. We started with, we all really understood the toilet paper shortage, right? We're having a problem that didn't go away.
Yeah.
But we also have those same kinds of problems that happen inside of the Air Force, right? It happens on a regular and recurring basis. Something crazy just comes up short for no freaking reason, right? Once we dig into it, we figure out what it is. But things happen like that. And so when it happens and it affects everybody, you have each program office that says, I'm the most important program office in the world because every program office does that. And I need to get it first. Well, we need to go out and figure out what the enterprise solution and how we're going to handle it. And then sometimes we have to do a little prioritization that goes along with it. But for the most part, my job isn't to tell them you need to sit and wait. My job is to connect them with the people that have the authority to make those kinds of decisions. So I spend a lot of time up and down the command chain, from in the program office up through AFMC, going into HAP and SAP to make sure that we have that conversation and that we're getting the right decisions that are coming out. People will say I own a lot of things. Mike, do you own DMSMS? I don't, right? Diminishing manufacturing sources and material shortages. No, I don't own it, but I know the guy that does. And if you're having a problem with it, I know a couple of people that can help you with it. So if you call and you say, Mike, I got a DMSMS problem, I'm not going to solve it for you, but I'm going to make sure you get a positive handoff to the right person. I look for something that's going to be DMSMS before it's DMSMS. I want to know 6 months before it's going to be published in GuideUp that something is going to be discontinued. So I can give you plenty of time to work it while it's either routine or urgent prior to it becoming emergent. So that's what our goal is when we go and do it. And then finally, develop command-specific SCRM training. So I spend a large preponderance of my time doing training, speaking in front of people, teaching at classes at AFIT, doing demonstrations and teaching down inside of the program offices and at the center level, as well as the same thing going up in front of HAP and SAP, giving presentations even up to like the joint staff. All of those are part of the job. You can see there's a couple other things. So these all come in 4.26.6, but there's 3 other places that have a reference stream. One talks about acquisition intelligence analyst. That comes in 2.10. 4.5, risk-based program management and decision making. So when we say supply chain risk management, we are part of a portfolio of risk management, right? We're not outside of that. When a PEO has to make a decision about their programs that are in their portfolio, they're measuring across all the risks. I am one of those flavors as it comes up. All right, and then finally, way down to 6.14, SCRM is defined, which is kind of interesting because previously all the SCRM references used to be done at 6.14. So it might just be a little. Next chart. So what do we do? Just like Dr. McKown said, we organize, we train, and we equip. So how have we met our requirements under the policy, but actually done them? The first is that we have an integrated SCRM focused network that's full of focal points and capabilities providers, right? Mike, what the hell does that mean? Focal point is your center reps that are out there. So the LCMC, the Lifecycle Management Center, short for AFLCMC, soon to be the Air Force Information Dominance Center and the Air Force Aerial Dominance Center Those are where the preponderance of our programs are, as well as the new weapons center, which is going to become, I believe, the nuclear systems or nuclear capability center. We have individuals that are positioned inside of those organizations with direct reach back. They get training, they get all sorts of references and tools and things they can use. So when a program calls and says, I need to get started on this, they can get them started. When it has something that they can't handle, or if it's super technical or deals with something that needs an Air Force opinion, they reach out to us. We're capabilities providers. The Air Force is right with people that do amazing jobs. We find them every day. And quite often, when I find somebody and I add them into the network, we have them just come and sit with us for a while. And when they do, they sooner or later go, I know what I'm going to do for you. And usually it's, I'm finding that I got a risk that's down in a program office, it's in their functioning area, and I give them a call and say, hey, this weapon system's having a problem with that. Is it something you can help with? And they go, yeah, that's what I do. Right? So we found them all over AFMC and even in the outside Air Force. So as much as I am the only dedicated civilian on staff at AFMC that does supply chain risk management, we have a whole bunch of people that take care of aspects of supply chain risk management, especially where we can give them that forward look while things are routine or urgent, and they can help program offices come up with one of those 4 risk management solutions. Well, I guess help them come up with 3, because acceptance isn't really helping anyone, right? We do proven analytics and techniques. We actually do our own research into companies if we need to. We also go out and look at a broader look, going across industries and where we're going to have issues of it. We also team up with IBAS, which is our industrial-based assessments that comes out of AFRL, as well as SAF CDM, which is the OSEA, Office of Commercial and Economic Activity, in order to share, one, what we have and what we find. But each of those organizations uses some of the same tools to come up with a different look at how our ecosystems perform. And so when we get the chance to cross-talk on it and get those 3 different viewpoints, quite often we can come up with a really informative position on any of the issues that are coming. We provide subject matter expertise, right? Not just on SCRM, but on a number of other ones. They sit inside of the supply chain management branch. I actually am the branch chief for it. So we have the subject matter experts on all things wholesale and supply. Next to us is the RX branch. They are the supply chain experts on all things retail. So between them, when we're talking about traditional supply chains, we have a whole lot of help. AFMC A4 is arranged around product support elements. So if you have other product support elements and POs or something else, across the aisle for me is A4F, right? That does the integration of product support elements. A4M sits behind my cube. Those are the maintenance bubbas that are back there. We have CE or A4C, which does all the civil engineering, facilities, buildings, real estate, things like that. So we have a lot of those 12 product support elements tied up. You might say, Mike, I got you. Sustaining engineering. We have an A410 EN that specifically does sustaining engineering. So we got a little bit of everything around where we can provide that SME guidance across a very broad span of functional areas. We also provide access to government and commercial data sources. That word access was chosen for a very specific reason. I don't buy data for everybody. I don't have the money for it. However, I do find ways for them to get data that already exists and is available inside of the Air Force. You'd be surprised if you were in the Air Force and you could get into our webpage. There is a quick search function on the front page that you can go and find all sorts of things you didn't know that. If you want to read an article in the Wall Street Journal, you can do it. It's there, but you got to know how to look for it, right? We have access into different capabilities coming from major commercial suppliers. So the ability to get a hold of Dun & Bradstreet information or S&P Cap IQ information. So that is available if you know where to go and where to get it, and you can go and find that information and leverage it for your own use. Not to manage your portfolio, that's not cool, but for government use. We do best practices and lessons learned. Like I said, I've been here almost 4 years now. In my opinion of what we need to do in SCRM from day one and today is vastly different. There was a full thought of owning and boiling the ocean before, and we have come back off of that to understand we don't want to do surgery from 10,000 feet. does no good to anybody else. I don't want to make decisions and force program offices into them. I've worked in program offices. I hated when people tried to make those decisions, because quite often they were looking from a viewpoint that was very specific, did not encompass the needs of the entire program. So we try to do that from our best practices and lessons learned. We have an enterprise viewpoint. Sometimes we have to tell somebody, hey, I'd rather you not do that because you're going to affect the next person instead. We can do it this way and help everybody. So we end up providing that enterprise viewpoint and also providing the head cover, the top cover, when we have those large enterprise problems, and making sure that our senior leaders are not only aware of them, but well schooled in them. Because sometimes there's some nuances inside a SCRM that are not really apparent in places. And if you were ever come to one of my trainings, where I sat in front of a bunch of PMs or PSMs or lobbyists or anybody else, you would learn the first two rules. And the first two rules are down there. The first one is, I don't care who you are, and I don't care who's bringing it to you. If someone brings you a risk, take the Pepsi challenge. Sir, do you know what the Pepsi challenge is?
I'm gonna pass on that one.
You're gonna pass on that, all right, so I'm gonna show my age.
I was wrong
what the
already.
challenge is. Way back in the 1980s, almost the 70s, Pepsi was trying to take market share for Coca-Cola, so they would put the two cards up and they would have them behind it, and they would try everybody trying, and then they would pull the cards up, see Jeff back there nodding, he knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And it would be, was it Pepsi or was it Coke? So what their Pepsi was trying to say is if it weren't for the name, you would choose Pepsi every time. So that's what we say with the validate the risk. Somebody's gonna come and say, you got a problem at the 6th tier of your weapon system, and you've got, whatever. Your left-handed underwater Fetzer valve is gonna be messed up because you're never gonna get it. Well, first off, I don't even know if I have a left-handed underwater Fetzer valve at all. I need to go and validate that I do. I need to validate that I have that company inside of my supply chain, because if I don't have any action to take. And then the last thing that I'm gonna do, after I validate, yes, I use that company, I do have parts that are part and parcel with them, then I need to internalize and understand how that risk is going to actually affect my program. Right? So the statement of the risk on the front, coming from somebody from the outside that's not in the program office, may be from a perspective that is general or quite often commercial or corporate, and not what a program office would actually be concerned with. It happens all the time. So I'll give you an example. They might, at the 5th tier, there's an accessory on your engine. That company that makes it, they lose intellectual property. So you probably need to get rid of them because your military IP is walking out the door. What if it's a commercial engine? Is it still a risk? It is. It's not my IP walking out the door. It's somebody else's IP. So what's my concern now? Well, maybe somebody's gonna steal that IP and make a cheap knockoff. Maybe they're just trying to make a quick buck, right? So now I've got to worry about a threat of counterfeits, as opposed to somebody finding some way to undo us from the technological edge. So it changes the way you think about risk when you say, how does it actually affect me and the program, as opposed to this is what I'm being told. Right? So I'm going to build on step 1 and step 2 for the rest of this presentation. Next chart. So this is what we believe tiers of supply are. If you go to John Q on the street, somebody that's not a logistician, somebody that's ever dealt with a super complex weapon system, and you say, what does the weapon system supply chain look like? They're not going to put these words or these designations in there, but they're going to draw you this hierarchical structure. Like this guy makes stuff, and that stuff goes into this stuff. And so we call it a case of the gazettas, right? Because this one gets into that one, and that one gets into this one, and finally you got to have 22 sitting on the runway, and they're not wrong. Right? The problem is that is way oversimplification. You can see in here, I'm showing I've got the weapon system at the top, just 2 subsystems going down into a line replaceable unit, read a big chunk that's taken off on the flight line, going down into an SRU, which is a shop replaceable unit, read the part that's going to be taken apart in a back shop or a depot, and then finally down to piece parts. There are multiple indentures of SRUs typically within any sort of component. And when we get down to piece parts, sometimes it's at different levels of indenture, right? So I could actually have piece parts at the LRU level. I could also have it at the SRU, I could have it at the sub-SRU level. And I'm talking about real piece parts that I need to put a new transistor on this board or a new MOSFET. right? As opposed to the card that goes into the box that is the power supply for an AESA radar, right? That's the difference. We think, all right, like, that's pretty easy, I can do that. This would be replicated inside of one LRU, potentially hundreds of times. Inside of a subsystem, potentially thousands of times. A weapon system, tens of thousands of times. And so when we try to think about it in simple terms, we get lost when reality sets in and you get data delivered to you, you don't know what to do with it. Next chart. This is really how it's organized. These are all companies doing business with other companies. There's less than 2,000 dots. Remember I said in an LRU, you could have 1,000. So half of this for one LRU that comes off of America. And they're all interrelated. And these arrows aren't one way. And due to rendering, they're not all represented on the sheet. So when you give somebody this and you say, you got a problem, now it looks like I got a lot of problems. But I'm not quite sure what to do with it. But we can't oversimplify the problem because it is a complex problem. We need to be able to represent it in ways that we can understand. Now, the best part of this is we already get a lot of this information and we get it from somewhere else. You can see that this particular format, how it's represented, is useful for something called centrality, which is a statistical analysis that say when things are clustered together, the more closely they're clustered, the more closely they are related, right? And the more they're clustered around the initial starting point, the more directly related they are in the delivery of that pin item. Great statistical tool if you want to know these are the items that go directly into that item, or something like this one. Looks off like here, I call this like one of rock weights, the forehead coming off the end of it. That would be a small subsystem that's probably commoditized, where you're buying it from anywhere, it doesn't matter. So that could be a stick of RAM, right? As long as it meets the specs, doesn't really matter who it is. That could be a Samsung or a Crucial or anybody that's delivering RAM today, right? Next chart. The issue that we have with a lot of the current tools that are out there is that they are trying to make sure they leave no stone unturned. And the work comes not in finding all the relationships, but in eliminating relationships that don't count. So when we go out and we look at these items and they are pushed out, you can see that a lot of these tools go out and say, not this part goes from here to here. They say that this vendor and this vendor have a business relationship. This vendor may have 4 strategic relationships listed part of their website. Maybe they put it in their 10K. Maybe they've got it out somewhere else where they've seen it. Maybe somebody pulled in a bill of lading or some other document, an MOA between companies that say, hey, I can prove it and I have an artifact that says that those 2 companies could work together. But if I go and I do the gathering this way and I say, this is your ecosystem, it doesn't all necessarily apply. I'll give you an example. We have an elimination of F-35 using this technique. Toyota Motor Company was in. How many parts from Toyota Motor Company are on the F-35? Anybody know? Hazard a guess?
0.
There are 0. You are correct, sir. Why are there 0? Because Toyota Motor Company, once we dug into it, was the fleet vehicle program for one of the companies that provided parts. So they did in fact have a business relationship with somebody within the supply chain, but you have to go in and kick those out. Now, there are a lot of vendors that will help you with that. Usually cost some money in order to do it. But what if you already knew within the first few levels that in this representation, that these yellow dots were actually my parts. And I didn't think I knew it. I didn't opine about it. I knew it. And I could assign part numbers to it, and I knew exactly what subsystem it was in, and I knew what weapon system it supported. Now I can do a lot of work with that. If I find out that last one at the end of the chain is my problem, I have a direct pathway to them. Instead of, I think there's a problem somewhere in your supply chain. And then the next part that might be next to it, if you got one on the left side of the aircraft, and you got one on the right side of the aircraft, and uses a different vendor for those last two steps. All right, so your assumption, maybe they all made the same way, one person makes the left and right, but now you know at the tail end that there's a difference. That's very powerful stuff when you're trying to figure out who is in your supply chain and what risks can be presented. And so what we are looking for is not dogging out the AI web scraping and aggregation tools, but taking step one to an extreme, which is if I got the first 5 or 6 or even 7 steps or tiers of my supply chain completely validated, then when I get something like the previous chart with that big bloom, and I'm looking past tier 7, it makes it easier for me to give relevance to the dots beyond. Today, when we start looking at those large blooms, we start looking at how defendable that information is. The confidence factor goes down pretty far. Even at tier 5 at times, we're seeing confidences in like the 15 to 10% range. Because they did what they said they would do. They didn't tell us it was anything that it wasn't. All of those businesses have a defendable business relationship. But sometimes with step 2, I don't care. And I don't want to waste time on it. So being able to find those first 5 or 6 steps, heck, you can be able to find the first 4 sometimes, would provide an amazing springboard that would say, anytime I get something in that says, I'm dealing with this string of companies that does not exist in my weapons system, I don't need to be concerned with it. All right? That's right. So how do we jumpstart that validation? Well, like Dr. McKown said, we buy a boatload of data. Boatload, right? You ever been in a program office? Like one of the things that you have to see, you ever done SQL reviews? They're merciless, aren't they? It's like every quarter they're like, hey, you gotta go on accept procedural. Geez, I just got done with the 10,000 line item on the last spreadsheet you sent me. And they're like, good, time for the next one, let's go.
And Mike, define what a sequel is. There may be some people that don't know what
That
that
is a
means.
contract deliverable, right? So when we're writing a contract, you're gonna see a few different parts of it. First part starts off, and I'm not a contracting officer, so don't hold me to this, but I'm right. You start off with all the things that you're calling out, the laws, the FAR, the Federal Acquisition Regulation, the DFARS, Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation, FARs, Air Force Acquisition Regulations, which either might be called out by citation or in whole. In citation, you're just going to get the title and say you got to follow this one, go look it up yourself, or in whole, they're going to print the entire FAR out there. The next thing you're going to get to is a whole list of signals. It's a boatload of them listed by CLIN, your contracting line item number. Those signals in will be attached with some sort of defining characteristic to it, usually known as a DID, data item description. Remember I said assist before? You want to know a DID? Go to assist. Don't sign in. Don't create an account. Quick look up. Type in what you're looking for. Plain language works fine. And it'll pop it up for you. Hence, when it pops up, there's a link. And there's a little picture that looks like a PDF. Don't click on the link. It's going to take you to another page that says this is when they did it. You want to click on the PDF. That's what gives you the DID. So the sequel will invoke the DID. It'll be listed at the top of it. It'll have a whole bunch of information in it. Will it be reviewed before it's accepted? Does it come on multiple deliveries, or are you only going to deliver it once? Who are you going to deliver it to? Who's going to accept it? And then down at the bottom, it'll be tailored, right? That means I'm going to go in and say, I know what the DID says. Well, I'm going to change some stuff, right? So it may say that, hey, in the past, I can only use this green and white track fed paper that comes off those really old printers that I saw in college. Maybe some of you did not. And we'll say, no, and strike that. We're going to tailor it as follows. We're not looking for a printed format. Electronic format is acceptable, right? Or preferred. Microsoft Excel 2003 or later, right? Or whatever the version is that they're looking for. All of that can be tailored into the bottom of the DID, which is listed, or into the serial, which starts with the basis of the DID. And that tells you what are the deliverables that you're going to pass over. How do you perform those duties that you're required under the contract? Comes down in either the SOO, the SAL, or the PWS, right? Statement of objectives, that's the SOO, SRO. Statement of work, that's the SAL, or PWS is the performance work statement. They all mean the same thing. They're used in different stages of the acquisition. SUE is the most open. SAL gets a little more targeted. PWS said these are the outcomes we're looking for that you're going to get paid, right? So you start off with, you got to follow these laws, you got to follow these regulations, you have these things that you're going to deliver to me, and if there's any specific things that happen underneath that, they're going to say these are the conditions under which you want to do. Right, so when we get these data formats and deliveries that come in, they usually come into a big storehouse. Whoever it is that owns that deliverable. So if I'm support equipment program manager and I get in a CERT, a support equipment requirements determination worksheet, that's going to be a deliverable that comes to me. And they'll say, Mike, you got a deliverable that came in on the system. And I have to go in and say, here's the procedural, here's the DID. I'm going to check the data that's in it. Is it acceptable? Does it meet the format, all the requirements that I put into it? And then I will accept that deliverable. I may have more work to do with it after that. Quite often you will, but that is how it comes into the office of the government. Because we accept all sorts of those items and they come in used for all sorts of various activities, they are usually very purpose-built. So when I'm doing an activity called provisioning, what is the goal of provisioning? The goal of provisioning is to get the indicative data of an item into our systems for integrated material management and determine what our requirements levels will be in order to have supportability. Sounds pretty easy, right? Reams and reams of data in order to go through it. It's about every little nitnoid part that comes across on that weapon system. Wait, Mike, you just told me you want to know down to a certain level what all the nitnoid parts are on your aircraft. Are you telling me that that data may already be there? Yes, that's exactly what I'm telling you. It's the whole reason I'm here. The problem I have with that data is that it is specifically formatted for provisioning. It's not formatted for script, right? When we go and do it, we're saying, we want you to have an ETL mindset. I want you to extract that data. I want you to transform it into a particular format that I can use, and I want you to load it back to where we can load it. All right. I want to repackage it into a usable format. We want to validate those initial tiers. We want the vendors to be directly tied, not to a part, but to a part number, so that we understand what it is and where it's at. And then we want to remove any duplicate screenings. Context is not key. Mike, what the hell does that mean? That means that if I have a company that I find a risk on, and it's just the company itself, not that particular part, then I can replicate that across everywhere. That company appears in that supply chain. I don't need to look it up 1,000 times. I'll look it up once. I'll mitigate it once. It'll apply across the whole program. If it's contextual, they supply me 5 different parts. One of them's made out of titanium, and titanium is my concern, that it's either coming from Russia or China, despite sanctions. Then now I need to go and look at each of the parts that has titanium, in this case 1, so I'm going to have a contextual mitigation for that specific part. Understand the difference? Sometimes I care about the company, sometimes I care about the part. This allows us to do that front part there, where we understand what those initial steps are inside of the supply chain. It force multiplies us when we start looking at those larger illuminations that are using those business relationships, because now I can get rid of those relationships that do not exist on my platform. Okay, next chart. So when I started talking about provisioning data, I'm going to give you an example about it. The first thing that I want you to look at is, I'm going to use a whole bunch of these terminologies when I go through here, right? I think we've already talked about this once. If you're a small business and you want to do business with the government, this is one of your best friends. This is what your deliverables are going to be based on, data item descriptions that are inside of it, and they'll be called out. Second thing is, there are standards organizations. Back in the 90s, early 2000s, the military said, we're not going to maintain our standards anymore, it's too expensive. So we're going to start using commercial standards. So when we're talking about provisioning, we use an SAE data standard. And that one's out there. You can procure it commercially. Talk to your accountant, but it's probably back to the other one. So provisioning data is organized. It is structured data, right? And I'm going to say this, and some of you that are in IT are going to laugh. It's structured in an 80-card column format. Why is it structured in an 80-card column format? Because when my first client came into the Air Force, whatever it was in the 50s for first job, was punching holes into cards that had 80 columns.
Seen them.
And they physically loaded them into the machine, and if you dropped them, there was hell to pay.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So we still use that format, the Navy does do something files. And we just do it digitally now instead of feeding punch cards in, because some of our systems are still a little old, right? So when we go and we look at it, we have PCCNs, provisioning contract control numbers, and provisioning list item sequence numbers. PLISMs, so PCCNs, the big area, the PLISM are the lines that come out, and they all come out of this provisioning parts list of the things that we're gonna go after. They are organized. They have codes inside of them that are meaningful, both on the position that they're in and which transaction they come across in. And there are systems today that help us take that 80-card column format and read it as a modern computer screen so that we can do provisioning. But what we don't have is a modern computer screen that'll show us how this fits back in to our configuration in order to do supply chain risk management. There is a sequence number that starts at the beginning of every PLISM. It is, I believe it's 4 digits. It's alphanumeric. Thank you, ma'am. And we need, might need to talk. So, and it's alphanumeric as it goes across. So it rolls. So the first item that comes out that is up at the top, it's going to be A, and then they start rolling A, and then for that, the next one down is going to be a B, then it's going to be a C, and then when you say, oh, I'm going to go to another chunk of it, then it's going to be A, BA, and then BB, BC, BD, and then CA, CB, CC. So when you're looking at a few charts back where we showed how people believe the supply chain is, they use that logic in order to show you what parts are related to what parts and how that structure goes together. Well, that sounds an awful lot to me like different levels of indenture or different tiers of a supply chain. Inside of those transactions are things like cage codes, commercial and government entity codes. You can go to a website called Cage and look those up. So there is an opportunity there. Also, the part number will be in there. There'll be a code that says, is this part number from a distributor, or is this part number from the actual manufacturer, or is it from a lead integrator? Change the number still, let you know what's actually out of. That's the story. All of that information is in there, and it also comes along with 2 types of data called EDFP. This is an accompanying deliverable that comes along with it. Engineering data for provisioning, which you and I would call a drawing. It's drawing of the thing that I'm provisioning. Sometimes it's 3D, sometimes it's 2D. We prefer 3D. A lot of times it'll be like a CAD CAM rendering of it. And then it'll have the indicative label that comes underneath it, like you would see on the drawing. It says, hey, it's this particular kind of bin, or it's this thickness of material if you can't tell from the drawing itself. And then finally, we get into logistics performance data. That's everything else about the thing. How big is it? How heavy is it? Does it have anything in it that we're need to be concerned with? All sorts of information we use to derive the codes that we need to populate into our logistics system to enable material management. So this is one example, just one example of data that we get delivered today. The issue is, I'm not a computer guy. I'm not a cyber guy. And even though I've seen it and I can physically look at it and I can intellectually understand it, I don't have the capability of transforming that data so that I can use it. And use it for provisioning. I actually have at every depot, I have a prime provisioning activity. Those ladies can see the matrix. But that doesn't help me prescribe. So this is one example. You might say there's other things out there. What about the actual configuration files for jets? Right? Airworthiness. How do we do airworthiness? We got to say everything that makes up the jet and say, we certify it, the jet's made of this, you can fly it safely. If it's military, if it's FAA, then the FAA certification has that configuration. And you have to have certified parts to do it. So there's a lot of areas, just like provisioning, which goes out and has structured data that already exists for a completely different reason, but has a lot of applicability into supply chain risk management. Okay, here's the other thing. If you're looking at me and you're like, Mike, I don't know what provisioning is. I bet you there's somebody near you that does. You might just have to ask, right? It happens every day in AFMC. I promise you, every day there's somebody provisioning. Like I said, we have 3 prime provisioning activities, 1 at each of our centers, or 1 at each of our 3 locations for the AFSC. There is an ability to find people with the knowledge to understand the structure. You can get the information by either going to GAIA or NICSIS, finding how that data is structured. And what we're looking for is somebody that has the time, the know-how, and the chutzpah to go out and crack the code on this one. So I have weapon system program offices that are saying, I need you to figure this out. Next slide. Too far.
Too far?
There we go. So what are we looking for from small businesses? We know that there are people that are out there working in program offices today, where you have somebody, if you're the business development guy, you have somebody that's delivering on the ground in a program office today. They may be a logistician that is responsible for screening those particular serials. They may be a program manager that's responsible for the acceptance and management of those serials. It may be somebody like an engineer that says, hey, I got this other set of data. Let's talk about things like practice. We have an analysis called practice, right? Its corresponding one is called FAMICA, right? Both of those highly regimented, repairability, maintainability, failure mode analysis. Those are all about parts and how parts related and what happens when the parts don't do what they're supposed to do. That's another potential source, if that's where your specialty is, to understand where you can go and deconstruct data. Right? So we're looking for the people that have that understanding and vision to be able to accomplish this task. We need you to have the capability to create tools, especially office productivity tools. Everybody know why I use that term in particular? What is an office productivity tool? I'm going to tell you, it's the stuff starting on this guy's computer. All right, it's not CAD/CAM, it's not anything like that. It's going to be things like Office 365, SharePoint, Teams, Power BI, Power BI for desktop. So we're excited about that. You guys probably had it all along. But those are the kinds of things like, if you can find me the way that I can get it and leverage it and use it today on the Air Force network, I am.
Yeah.
Trying to go out and get things like your authorizations for software, multi-million-dollar implementations that need to be put on FedRAMP and items like that. I don't necessarily have an appetite. I'm looking for know-how, intellectual muscle, and somebody that knows how to develop these kinds of things. They must work on the Air Force network. We are currently on Office 365. So if you bring me something in Office 97, probably not going to work, right? You need to be able to present the underlying data in an actionable decision level format. So when you tell me, Mike, this is what your supply chain is, I need to be able to say, why do you think that? Well, like I took your provisioning data and it's this PCCM and this BLISM that points to that part. I would be like, that meets it, right? I looked at your engineering configuration file and these are the people that are listed for that particular part. That meets it, right? I'm looking for us to be able to go back in, because the need is when a risk comes up to be able to rapidly assess, does it affect me? That's number one. I got to be able to validate. And this is the springboard to do it, right? You must be able to defend the provenance of data, meaning that you're not going to get it from gold. You're not going to pull it in from Haystack. You're going to have it from something that we leverage and deliver as official government data, right? I can't give you a data set that looks like it. Can't give you an example. Can't give you program office data, it's all CUI or higher. But you can find examples of it out in the wild to help you do your development. Or if you're already in the program office, then you'll let you. Your reporting must be flexible. I'm not looking for a linear pathway to success. Mike, if you hit these 7 buttons in the state order that I gave you, you're gonna get the answer you want. It's not what I'm looking for, right? I'm looking for a drill down. Find something, can I see what's below it? Right, so I'm saying LRU, can I see the SRUs and the piece parts? I need to drill up. I see the item that's down as a piece part. What SRU, what LRU does that affect? Right? I need the presence of vendors across an ecosystem. be able to type in the name and have it go to these three subsystems, and it's across these different LRUs. And then finally, I need to target specific LRUs or SRUs, so I can go directly to it and say, tell me everything that's inside of that. So we're looking for a way to get in and have that data listed out so that we can do searching, indexing, cross-referencing, so that we can rapidly validate who is in that supply chain, so that when we're brought a risk, step one becomes a whole lot easier. And when I need to go off the end of my known universe, right? Because you're gonna have people that say, Mike, you need to know all the way down to raw materials where your stuff is coming from. So where did that magic sand come from that makes the semiconductor that you put on a board that goes inside of the box, that goes inside of the power amplifier, that goes inside of the radar, that goes inside of the SoC? If I don't know those first steps, I don't think I really care where the magic sand came from. And I know it's way more technical than that, but not for a lot, right? So in order for us to be able to leverage those other kinds of items that are out there, people that are doing that big brain work, go out and do things like gather data trends and translating languages and all the other things, I have to have a definitive springboard to go off of and say, if I follow my path down to the end of the known world, I at least can validate within that data set that this is a more likely way that I'm going, as opposed to today at the 5th or 6th level being down to 10% or less confidence. At the 5th or 6th level, I should get 100% confidence. Now I can work at 7th, 8th, 9th to worry about things like magic sand and whether or not they come from the land of that is. The last thing that's in there, flexibility to adapt to different data deliverable formats. Remember when I talked about Taylor and sequels? The words that are the bane of my existence. Contractor format accepted. That says, as long as you do it in the spreadsheet, I'm good, right? So you may have the hard-coded requirements from PCCNs and PLISNs. They may be ordered in the way that they're supposed to be. There may be 2 extra columns at the opening portion of that sheet or that transaction. It may come in a PDF instead of an Excel. There's all sorts of ways that that stuff can come across. So we need to think about a little flexibility so it has the broadest application possible. That's it. That's what I'm looking for. Next chart. What are your questions?
We do have some online.
With the recent growth of AI, is there also interest in supply chain risk analysis of AI components?
You mean risk analysis on the AI itself? Like tell me what's risky about ChatGPT?
Probably, yeah.
You think that's it? Is there? Yes, there is. And we have a couple of groups at the OSD level that are working with us. One group called CDAO. And that is an OSD level function. They are in charge of all of the AIs, all the different flavors, large languages, neural networks, and all that stuff. So there is one. I don't in particular have one for Scrim yet, mostly because we're not using AI. I say that. Mike Hoover on his desktop cannot use ChatGPT. We're not allowed to. So personally, right now, I have other alligators. I like to think of this, right? So you got impact, probability, and then you have time front. I have alligators in my canoe. That big AI alligator is a little further. So
Mike, what about the other side of it? Are you looking, when you, on that previous chart, when you talk about what you're looking for, would you want a solution that ultimately may use AI to help identify potential scrim when you have issues with the part or material or with the file?
So right now I'm looking, fast, cheap, good,
Yeah.
right? I'm really looking for all 3, right? I can only pick 2, but I'm gonna ask for 3. I'm really looking for somebody that says, I can do this internally. I don't want to sell it once, I want to sell it 100 times. I want to put somebody in to help do the work because we gotta be flexible down there at the end. And they want to do it for a whole bunch of people. I'm not looking for the giant AI overlord in the sky that will tell me everything. There are other people in OSD that are working on that. You know, we have a program named Skyboard, another one called Skynet. Don't learn from movies, do we?
Yeah, no.
So in the future, yes, we actually have some future capabilities that are working on things like AI and blockchain and items like that. My immediate need comes before those. Other questions?
Do you hire contractors for data analyst roles?
Do I personally hire contractors?
Your office?
There are contractors that work as data analysts in my office, yes.
Okay.
There are at other levels, there are also contractors that work, so LCMC has contractors, AFMC has some contractors, so yes, there are some AMAS, right, advisory and administrative and advisory service contractors that are being used. I don't hire them directly.
Right.
Put out a requirement, we cut a contract that brings them. Yeah, no personal services contract.
I think going back to your AI answer there, you got this gentleman saying this is similar to some work that our company has performed under the SUBER program. Would there be any interest in exploring these problems in a SUBER context?
Yes. That might actually be preferred. Cool. So you have been looking at shopping through SIBR, that gives us the ability to go through a couple of iterations. As long as I have an end customer in mind.
Mike, one of the things you said that it should work on the Office 365 network. Does that mean on the cloud, or do you have your, Air Force has its private cloud, or can it be on the Azure platform, or?
So I wish I had an answer for you. Somebody in the Air Force does. I know that my stuff is backed up to the cloud on a regular recurring basis. And that my desktop says that it's part of an Air Force cloud one or something like that. As far as how is that technically implemented, I have no idea. I do have the ability to save things to my desktop. So like a real desktop, not just the cloud replicated desktop. So I think the answer is yes, both.
Because a lot of the functionality these days is deployed in the cloud, even for Office 365 products, right, or SharePoint. And so that's why I was asking that question.
I can ask.
Hmm.
I can ask. You guys don't mind grabbing that question for me. I'll ask.
Related question. So the transform that you're asking for, not gonna be done with Office 365 product. Could that be done offline, FedRAMP certified cloud, and the load be to your standard ontology on your system so that you can run your dashboards, do your drill down? And then would you like the ability to attach notes when you're doing the research so that you actually can assemble, call it, meaningful information with your analysis?
I would be open to talking about it. Right? If you can't do it any other way, yeah, absolutely. I'd be open to talk.
Martin, was that you that asked the question on chat? Was that you?
No,
Oh,
sir.
if it's somebody else from Tsunami?
Yeah, it's probably Martin Thompson.
Yeah, okay, I think he just asked the same question.
Very nice, right?
We did this.
Yeah, willing to talk about it. Sir.
Thank you. Just want to confirm some data, something you said. So you're saying that all the data you want worked on, you have already. It's just the format that is not convenient for what you want to use it for. That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
And you can't provide examples of that data. We have to go research that ourselves.
I can't give you official government data until we enter into a contractual relationship, which has the provisions in it to protect my data.
Would you be able to
You
share?
also said that there's probably out there.
There's examples that are already out floating around in the wild that you can determine is this feasible for me or not.
And you're also saying go look at those procedurals and DIDs, because that will explain how that data has been delivered.
Correct. And how the data is structured. The
Yeah.
most important part, how it's structured today and delivered to the government. You guys are letting me off pretty easy. Well, we're. You waiting until afterwards, checking over the BBC.
I just want to know how many people really put screwdrivers in the top drawer. I'm up on that.
Oh,
chance that they do.
there's my people right
I
there.
guess I got different training. That was it. That was a hard one for me.
Obviously, this,
Oh,
sorry. It says, it seems like an elephant to try and figure out how to eat. Because supply chain for the Air Force is gonna be huge.
I don't want you to solve it for the whole Air Force. I want you to solve it for one deliverable.
Okay. So more proof of concept at the small level to see what we can do to replicate it out to a larger extent would be.
Still, you are putting, in my opinion, in this scenario, the cart in front of the horse, because you want a solution to a problem that you do not yet know all the criteria of. I mean, to know what vendors you have that now creep into your supply chain problems, you would first have to document them. Well, if you've gone to the trouble of documenting them, then you're kind of behind it already.
So we have capabilities, once you know who is in your supply chain, to evaluate those particular. So the answer is, like when neon came out, everybody's like, oh, we don't have any neon, right? And they asked me, Mike, how important is neon? I was like, well, if we're not looking at 80s dive bar ear signs, I don't think we have any problems. I didn't know we used it for shielding gas, printing, those little pieces of silicone, but it becomes real important. But somebody in the Air Force knew how important it was, and that's why they asked them instead of me. I know the data is there, and I know that if I have to find a problem and I have to go after it, with great consternation, we can think we can do it. I am looking for a springboard to get us ahead. So instead of trying to eat an elephant, but I need it done 1,000, there's 100,000 bytes in that elephant, right? And then each line item coming across on a deliverable. And even being able to go and start seeing how it fits together, even if I had to piece it together, even if I had a SQL database that could only hold one subsystem in it, I had 15 different SQL databases. If it's in the format that I need and I can use a visualization to go through and manage it, I'm light years ahead. Light years ahead. And we've already proven the concept, right? Another thing, a bomb, a bill of materials, right? Like what kind of bomb, please? Any bomb, this one, right? Finding a way to go and rip that apart, presenting it back to me in a place that can be easily managed. Oh, that's. What's that?
So we could show you.
So that'd be great. That'd be great. Look, it's one here. If you have something already done, even better. But like, that's what we're looking for. So I have developed capabilities. I have contracted capabilities. I have friends that allow me to use the capabilities. Once I know who it is, then I can go find them. Or when I find the problem, I can dig in and see who all's involved. We're getting the rapidity, right? I need to do it fast. And today, it's a science project. Tomorrow, I want to be able to call and have somebody say, this is where it's at, and this is what it's about. Don't worry about the rest of the problem. That would be next year's server. Today, I see the transform data, so I know exactly who is there. If somebody knows, I have it delivered to me, it's just not in a format that is conducive to what I.
Well, like your bubble over your hat. You may have 3 or 4 different sources for this device. And through DLA screening, whatever you do, you're gonna find out that it is company A, and that's who the government's been buying it from, that's who we're gonna buy it from, but I have others that I can buy it from. Now, do you start assessing risk? Because now I have 3 sources for that. Am I looking at each one of those sources as my risk?
Potentially. But when I go in and provision an item that already exists as an item of supplier, do a short provisioning and say, just use that stock number that already exists, the data's already there. So we'd already know that I had multiple vendors that are on top of it, and through the INS grouping, I would know whether I had a preferred part, or if I'm just gonna order at the subgroup master level, or if there's one in particular I don't want. And we have ways to code that into the requisitions so that we would know particularly what it is that we were actually using, as opposed to what it could potentially be. But what I need to start with is, at the fourth level of indenture in that subsystem, it is that stock number. Then I can go and do the rest of the work and say, do I care if it's a paid part number in that stock number, or do we have restrictions in that stock number? I can do the rest of that work. That's my whole branch. We just need to make sure we're getting rock solid. It is that part. We'll drill down to the part.
If we have something that,
Yeah, sorry. So another question I have is.
You speak up just a little bit.
Yeah, sorry. Do you share any unique identifying numbers, like parts numbers or serial numbers with your suppliers? Like, are there like unique identifying numbers that you use to identify parts within the gamut of the data source that you have that is not only used internally, but is also shared with, so where a supplier can see the same number and both of you know what you're talking about? Is that something that exists?
You mean kind of like a key index field that?
Yeah, just anything that where like you can just mention, of course, as opposed to saying the name of the part, you just mention a number and everybody knows, like that's within your supply chain knows, okay, this part means this, regardless of.
So two major divisions that happen there. One is we do something called stock listing, which is tied to the national stock number, right? And that falls down from the Title 10 responsibility that any item must supply can only be owned by one item. I also have parts that are managed by part number and page. So in that case, program office and the vendor know this thing is not going to be stock listed. There's lots of good reasons for it. And they're going to know that that particular combination is there. What I'm looking at is that the vendor has delivered that data already to the government. They already have a common understanding of what it is that is defined in that CPL document, which includes the data item description that describes how it's supposed to be in there. And so they have a common understanding of what was delivered and what was received for anything that is part number page managed. Then, when it gets stock listed and it gets an MSN assigned to it, then you get another identifier if we go through that process that speaks to it where anybody knows what it is. You could get a copy of FedLog, which is the offline version of the FLIS, the Federal Logistics Information Center, download it right from DLA's website, and you can go in and pop in stock numbers all day in SNs, and it'll tell you what they are. We keep some of the data fields from you because some of that is considered CUI data, but for the most part, if you have a stock number, you want to know what that thing is, it'll tell you what the item is, it'll tell you when it was stock listed, it'll tell you size, the shape, how much it weighs. It'll give you some indicative data at the bottom, it's in plain text. It'll tell you who are all the manufacturers that it could be. It'll tell you if there's an interchangeability and suitability, meaning this part can be swapped with this part, but not for that one. It's coded in. There's all sorts of great information that goes in. But that is at the end of the provisioning. Go from provisioning, when we get all that data, and then as she was saying, it goes to Battle Creek, the DLA, and they go and they look at it and say, have I ever seen you before? That's one of the reasons we get the engineering data for provision. It's a little off topic. I love education. Engineering data for provisioning is so they can take the drawing that you received and look at the drawing they have on file and go, I think that's the same thing. If it is, and they think it's a match, they call out to the first person that ever did it, and they said, hey, I got this drawing. Got the same as yours? If that guy says yes, then they add it to that same spot. So there's a whole bunch of rules that go along with it. It's all in the Defense Logistic Management publications, balance publications that come out. DLA manages them and says about how all those codes, those exchanges, how the data flows, all the items work. But that is all. I'm done with provisioning. I started a capability called cataloging, which is transitioning that data into a stock listing. That goes to DLA Battle Creek. It's a bunch of ladies sitting in the room that do this all day, and they start assigning stock numbers. So I wish it was different. That's actually how it works.
so Mike, if we have something that might meet your need or to even explore further as far as your specific requirements, what is the typical next step? We have never worked with the Air Force before, so I'm just trying to get a sense of.
So the next step is you should talk to me today. I'm gonna be around for it, right? Quite often I'm here until Jim said we gotta close the joint down, then we go across the parking lot. You're not opposed to that. If you are, I'll stand outside, it's hot, whatever. Have a discussion with me. If you have a card, give me your card. For all of you, my email is michael.hoover.17. I am 17, so I need to remember my name is on the presentation, michael.hoover.17@us.af.mil. If we talk today, you have a much better chance of me remembering who you are and returning your email. So if you want to, give us a holler, right? Let's have a discussion about what you think you might be able to offer. We'll get some information exchange. I'll give it to you again. My hearing's not so good. And then we'll see what we can go with. It may lead to a SIBR, right? A small business innovation research grant, which allows us to leverage small business administration. Jeff would love it. He gets credit for that. And say, hey, we need to start down the road. There's 3 different phases of it. One starts with, hey, we're committing in principle. The second is we're going to generate a prototype or a working version of it. And the third is now we're going to go find somebody to actually.
And for those that are online, you can also reach out to Mike, or if you have our time connecting, then come to me.
Yeah.
I'll help you get connected.
I see Jeff on a regular basis at the coffee shops. Sir?
Where do you see the funding coming from, to kind of transition that technology, or?
Depends on the scale of what you're asking for. So pricing is going to be key. Ultimately, program officers. They're the ones that have the requirement to do it. They say, I've already paid a boatload of money for this data. I want to reuse it. So pricing is going to be key.
So
I
what
can't tell you what that is.
What program offices are reaching out to you then to kind of drive that?
Lots of them. Across multiple PEOs. But you're going to come through me first. So I make sure you're going to deliver what they need.
I'm Brian McShelton from AFRL, small business, and one of the things I just want to share, just for everybody's awareness, that we just stood up a digital capabilities director a little bit over a year ago. We're almost maybe into our two-year mark. Last week, we were just in discussions that one of the forward-moving opportunities that they're going to be doing is setting up an environment where people can bring in their AIS type solutions, and we have an opportunity to evaluate, to assess, determine, what's the applicability, how could we leverage those inside AFRL. So I know this is really looking at, logistics, sort of risk management, supply chain solutions, but sometimes as we look at those types of solutions and those systems, there could be other permutations of that application also in other areas that may be conducive to our organization. So again, I'm just throwing it out there. It's not developed yet. Okay. It's not there, but it's on the way, just for your guys' awareness.
Do they plan on giving feedback to those companies that
They do.
participate? Okay,
Yeah.
so-
Yeah. They used to, man, I don't know, Jeff, this goes way back, but I can remember when I was a small business coming into LCMC, they used to have an environment, a kind of, we called it the test lab. Basically, anybody could bring in their capabilities and they could load them on the machines there. They could kind of run through a demo of it so that we could bring in folks from program offices or other areas to look at it. And I know that was a long time ago, so I'm talking like maybe 20 years ago. And well, it was when they first started rolling out the first standard desktop. So that was quite a few years back. So anyways, that's kind of where AFRL is going. Just wanted to make everybody aware of that.
Any other questions, comments? Like crazy? I don't know.
Got one. Nobody else.
Yeah.
We have a market research AI tool. Does it need to be Fed ramped to work with the Air Force?
I have no idea. That's a software solution, right?
Okay.
I might know somebody that has that answer, Jeff.
Well, I would say to contact my office and set up a discussion.
Yeah, 8-6 or something.
Yeah, you know, it depends. I need to know more. Is there a third question?
Mike, this is Rob Baglia with Contium. We have a CCMS that might be a good fit for your issue. I'd like to get the time to talk to you about it. Good. Yeah, got your email, I wrote it there.
Okay, anything else? Because
One just popped up there. Sorry. Oh, Sid, thanks.
okay, with that, thank you, Mike. Okay, so that concludes today's Collider. Reminder, next Thursday afternoon is our masterclass in SAM, System for Award Management, and USA spending. So this is our data folks telling you how you can run reports or identify opportunities and do competitive analysis, identify existing contracts that are in your market sector in the federal procurement data system. So we're trying to help you to become your own expert in data analytics, or at least do those initial reports out of those existing data systems. So super, I think a great opportunity for all of you to be able to get that exposure. Yes, sir.
So if anybody is not registered for that and would like to register for that, send me an email. I think everybody here has my email. Because I'm having a problem with Eventbrite right now. It maxed out. I tried to add more registrants and it crapped out on me. So send it to me. I'll just make a separate list of, so I can make sure that you guys get all the information to attend the event. Okay. That's good.
Would you add that to the Eventbrite announcement?
What's that?
Add that to the Eventbrite announcement to contact you directly.
I'm going to send out another email to everybody. What I want to do. We have 250 registered right now.
Okay, well, with that, we'll call it a day, so appreciate it. Thank you.
I enjoy hearing music.
Most people don't. Yeah.
That's why.
Appreciate it.